Now, for more on these exit poll results and what the UK faces going forward, let's bring in Gaurav Sharma. He's the business editor at the International Business Times UK. Welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
So certainly appears like a surprise based on these exit polls. What's your take on how this snap general election is playing out?
Well, if you go by the last two exit polls, they've got it more or less correct. But of course, the exit polls did get it wrong spectacularly in 1992. But that's going back some time. Now, there's one thing that needs to be said. The polls still suggesting, the exit polls still suggesting that the Conservatives would be the largest party. Now, last time around, also the exit poll got it right. But then eventually, the Conservatives ended up just sort of stumbling over the line. Now, whether that's good or not good enough, or whether that will be achieved by Theresa May, remains to be seen. But this does throw a spanner in her works, definitely.
So given this uncertainty, what does this mean in terms of how Brexit could perhaps proceed as negotiations take shape?
I think as far as the Europeans are concerned, they're probably foxed by all what is going on in the UK. As your colleague alluded to before we started speaking, is that it throws another question mark into the whole process. Now, in a few weeks' time, in less than 11 days' time, in fact, the two parties are going to sit down to negotiate, and who will be at that negotiating table? Now, for what it's worth, Theresa May just might secure a smallish majority and still head to Brussels, yet it could also be that same coalition of chaos that she's been telling people about, which would be a combination of Labour, SNP, the Welsh Nationalists, and perhaps the odd Lib Dem MP thrown in the mix.
And what were really the key economic issues in this general election that really stuck with voters?
Well, you see, this was supposed to be the Brexit election. That's how the Prime Minister sold it to the great British public. But events overtook her. First, she had this spectacular sort of U-turn over social care plans. Then the whole situation completely turned on its head when the UK was subject to less than sort of 3 terror attacks in 3 months. So what was supposed to be the Brexit election, then a whole host of things came into the equation. The economy is not in a happy place. It's rumbling along okay. We're having 0.2% growth on quarter. That's still growing. It's still not those doomsday forecasts that we had in wake of the Brexit result. But at the moment, what the economy needs is a lot of certainty, and this poll just throws all that up in the air.
And what was it about the run-up to the election that you think could have really been the determining factor in the way people voted?
I think a lot of people are fed up with austerity, and if this exit poll is borne out in reality, then a lot of people fed up by austerity, fed up by messages of the NHS not getting the kind of investment it needs, probably turn to Labour. The Prime Minister's message was that she's a safe pair of hands. We have a long night and a long morning ahead of us to find out whether people actually bought that message. But it does look like some people were fed up by the ongoing austerity, which dates all the way back to 2010, and that has come back to bite the Conservatives.
So for those who are austerity weary and those who've perhaps for that reason decided to perhaps change their vote to Labour, how does this impact the economic landscape for the country going forward?
I very much doubt that there can be some compromises made on the austerity front. The Labour Party is saying that it tends to borrow more and then invest more towards infrastructure, towards various sort of projects, but they haven't really provided the costings themselves. Added on top of that, Jeremy Corbyn wants to undertake a drive of nationalisation. So if the UK ditches austerity and goes down the route of spending under, say, a Labour-led coalition government, that does not necessarily solve the UK's macroeconomic problems. It, in fact, kicks the can down the road.
And one of the things we saw also was this difference with income inequality. How much do you think that shaped, and we know that this was an issue for the Brexit vote, do you think that was still playing on the minds of voters in this snap election?
Oh, most definitely so. If you look at it from a macroeconomic standpoint, inflation has gradually crept up, whereas we tend to think that over the last 3 years, wage growth has more or less been stagnant. So rising inflation, but stagnant wage growth, and that started biting into people's earnings, and they have perhaps voted on that basis, as it appears, the ballot box.
And just quickly, in terms of perhaps the uncertainty that could come should Theresa May lose her place as Prime Minister, what does that do to the UK economy?
I think I'm not sure whether it necessarily gives the UK a weaker hand, but what it does is that it confuses the picture further. What the markets can tolerate is a whole lot of bad news, a whole lot of good news. But what a hung parliament would do is that it creates uncertainty. I think that is over the short to medium term, that's likely to have an impact on the pound sterling. In terms of the UK's negotiations with Brussels, Brussels would treat Westminster as one entity. So how they react would probably be sort of similar, but I think they'll probably prefer more of a coalition of chaos, as the Prime Minister calls it, at the table, rather than one obstinate party dictating the terms of the talks.
Well, certainly a long night ahead. Thank you so much for your insights, Gaurav Sharma.